I never considered myself the jealous type. My wife, Emily, and I had been married for 7 years, and though no marriage is perfect, I believed in the strength of our bond. We had history, trust, or so I thought. That night started like any other. Emily and I had just finished watching a show together in bed. She had been distant lately, but I chalked it up to stress. Work had been draining for both of us, and I figured we had fallen into one of those lulls that all couples go through. She drifted off before I did, curled up on her side, her breathing soft and steady. The glow of her phone screen caught my eye. She had left it on the nightstand, face up. Normally, I wouldn't have looked. I respected her privacy. But something about the way the screen lit up and the preview of a message caught my attention. Can't stop thinking about tonight. When can I see you again? My stomach clenched. The name on the message was just a single letter, J. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. 1,000 thoughts raced through my head. Was this a misunderstanding? A joke? Was it even meant for her? Before I could stop myself, I picked up the phone. It was locked, but the message was still visible in the notification bar. A second one appeared right below it. You looked so good today. I can still feel you against me. The air felt heavier in the room. My hands tightened around the phone. Emily stirred slightly but didn't wake. I could hear my pulse in my ears. This had to be a mistake. It had to be. I looked at her, peaceful and unaware. The woman I had built a life with. The woman I trusted. The woman who, apparently, was exchanging intimate messages with someone named Jay. I placed the phone back down, careful not to wake her. My mind was racing, but I needed more than a couple of messages to make any assumptions. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Or maybe, it was exactly what it looked like. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to her steady breaths while my mind unraveled. The next morning, Emily woke up as if nothing had happened. She kissed me lightly on the cheek before heading to the shower, her phone still resting on the nightstand. I had a choice to make. I could confront her immediately, demand an explanation, or I could dig deeper. If there was something to uncover, I wanted the whole truth before she had a chance to twist it. So, when she left for work, I made my first move. I just wasn't ready for what I was about to find. The second Emily left for work, I grabbed my laptop and started digging. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but those messages weren't innocent. If I confronted her now, she could deny everything, delete evidence, twist it into something that made me look paranoid. No, I needed proof. I started with the basics. Emily had been acting differently for the past few months. Small things. She guarded her phone more closely, changed her passcode, started working late more often. I had chalked it up to stress or just a rough patch in our marriage. Now, I wasn't so sure. I tried to unlock her phone before she left, but she had already changed the code. A dead end, for now. Instead, I turned my attention to our shared laptop. Emily wasn't the most careful with technology. Sometimes, she stayed logged into social media or email. Maybe I could find something there. I opened her email first. Nothing unusual, work messages, newsletters, the usual clutter. But then I noticed something odd. The trash folder had been recently emptied. Not just once, but several times over the past few weeks. That wasn't like Emily. She rarely deleted emails, let alone cleared them permanently. I kept searching. Next, I checked our phone records. We shared a phone plan, so I could access her call and text history online. And that's when I saw it. A number. Repeatedly. She had been texting the same number almost every day for the past 2 months. Dozens, no, hundreds, of messages. And not just during the day. Late at night. Early in the morning. The number wasn't saved in her contacts, just a bare, unrecognizable string of digits. I copied it and did a quick search. No social media profiles linked to it, no public records. But then I tried something else. I plugged it into a reverse phone lookup site. The name that came up: James Carter. I didn't recognize the name, but the sinking feeling in my stomach told me Emily did. Who the hell was James Carter? I checked her calendar next. Emily was meticulous about planning. If she was meeting him, maybe she had left a clue. And there it was, several vague entries over the past month: lunch meeting, yoga class, client consultation. She didn't do yoga. And I knew for a fact she didn't have any new clients. The worst part? Each of these meetings lined up with times she had texted that number. I sat back, my mind spinning. This wasn't just a passing flirtation. Emily was hiding something. I needed to see her phone messages. If I could get past the passcode, I could see everything. And then I remembered something. Emily used her face to unlock her phone. That night, while she slept, I would get in. And I would finally know the truth. The hours leading up to that night were agonizing. I went through the motions of my day, pretending everything was normal. But inside, my mind was churning, unraveling every interaction Emily and I had in the past few months. Had she kissed me after being with him? Had she come home, smiled at me, and told me she loved me while texting him under the table? I felt like a fool. But not for long. That night, Emily fell asleep easily, just like she always did. If guilt was eating her alive, she wasn't showing it. I, on the other hand, lay beside her, staring at the ceiling, waiting for her breathing to deepen. When I was sure she was out, I carefully reached for her phone. My heart pounded in my chest as I angled the screen toward her face. The screen flickered. Then unlocked. I swallowed hard and opened her messages. There it was. James Carter. I tapped the thread. The first few messages were casual, harmless even. But as I scrolled, the words became something else entirely. James, I can't stop thinking about the other night. Emily, me neither. I've never felt like that before. I clenched my jaw. James, you looked so beautiful, the way you melted into me. Emily, stop, you're making me blush. But I love it. I could feel my pulse in my ears. My hands tightened around the phone. But it only got worse. Emily, I wish I could see you more. It's getting harder to lie. James, you don't have to lie, Em. You don't belong in that marriage. My breath hitched. Emily, don't say that. It's not that simple. James, it is. Leave him. I stopped scrolling. Was that where this was going? Was she planning to leave me? I should have stopped reading. I should have put the phone down. But I couldn't. And then I saw it. Emily, I don't know what to do. He's starting to notice. I think he suspects something. My stomach dropped. James, then we have to be careful. But I meant what I said. I love you, Em. Emily, I love you too. The words blurred on the screen. I had seen enough. I put the phone back down, my hands shaking. Emily stirred slightly but didn't wake. She was lying right there next to me, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. I wanted to wake her up and demand the truth. I wanted to scream, to ask her how she could say those words to another man while lying beside me every night. But I didn't. Instead, I got up, walked out of the room, and stood in the darkened hallway, trying to control my breathing. She loved him. She loved him. I had my proof. Now, I had a decision to make. Would I confront her? Would I let her dig herself deeper? Or, would I make her pay for what she had done? One thing was certain. Emily had no idea what was coming. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the words on her screen. I love you too. Morning came too soon. I was already awake when Emily stirred beside me, stretching with a sleepy sigh. She rolled over and kissed my shoulder like she had 100 times before, like nothing had changed. But everything had. Morning, she murmured, her voice thick with sleep. I forced a smile. Morning. She climbed out of bed, completely unaware that I knew everything. I watched her move around the room, picking out her clothes, tying her hair up. She was getting ready for another, normal, day, another day of lying to me, of texting him, of pretending. It made my skin crawl. But I couldn't let her see that. Not yet. Got a busy day? I asked, keeping my voice light. She paused, looking at me briefly before nodding. Yeah. A few client meetings. Lies. She kissed my cheek. I'll be home late. Don't wait up, okay? I forced myself to smile. Of course. I watched her leave, the scent of her perfume lingering in the air. The second I heard the front door close, I let my face fall. I had a plan. I grabbed my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. After 2 rings, a familiar voice answered. Well. To what do I owe the pleasure? I took a deep breath. I need a favor. A pause. Then. This should be interesting. The man on the other end was Ryan Carter. An old friend. He wasn't exactly what you'd call clean. Ryan knew how to get information, and right now, I needed everything on James Carter. The last name was just a coincidence. No relation. But still, it felt ironic. James Carter. Ryan repeated, tapping something in the background. Common name, but let's see what I can find. Give me an hour. While I waited, I did my own digging. I wasn't stupid enough to message the guy from my own phone, but I did the next best thing. I created a fake number through an anonymous app and sent a text. Me, hey, it's me. My phone's acting up. This is my new number. I held my breath, waiting. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. James, Emily. I stared at the screen. He really thought it was her. My hands clenched into fists. He didn't just love my wife. He thought he had her. I typed back. Me, I need to see you. James, I thought we were being careful. Me, please. Just tell me where you are. I can't stop thinking about you. I felt sick sending it. But I needed to know more. A few seconds later, he sent an address. A coffee shop. I checked the time. Emily was still at work. I was going to meet him. The coffee shop was small, tucked away in a quiet part of town. I parked down the street and watched from my car. Then, at exactly 12:30, a man walked in. Tall. Dark hair. Athletic. Probably mid-30s. He looked like someone who believed he was the main character in every room he walked into. James Carter. My blood boiled, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't about emotions. This was about control. I got out of the car, adjusted my jacket, and walked inside. He was sitting at a small table by the window, scrolling through his phone. Probably waiting for Emily. I approached, keeping my face unreadable. He looked up when I reached the table. Confusion flickered in his eyes. Can I help you? I smiled. You must be James. His eyes narrowed. Do I know you? I pulled out my phone, opened Emily's messages, and placed it on the table in front of him. His face went pale. I think you do, I said. The color drained from his skin as he realized who I was. Listen, man. No, I cut him off, keeping my voice calm. You listen. He glanced around, suddenly nervous. I leaned in. You have two choices, James. 1, we have a civil conversation. 2, you keep lying to my face, and I make this very unpleasant for you. He swallowed hard. Let's start with the basics, I said. How long have you been screwing my wife? James shifted uncomfortably. Look, I gave him a warning smile. Try again. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. A few months. I already knew that. She tell you she loves you? I asked. He hesitated. Yeah. I nodded slowly. And did she tell you she was married? His jaw clenched. She told me you didn't love her anymore, he said finally. That your marriage was over, but she was afraid to leave. A bitter laugh escaped me. Is that so? I leaned back. Then tell me, James. If she's so in love with you, why is she still coming home to me every night? He didn't have an answer for that. Good. I stood up, pocketing my phone. Stay away from my wife, James. He scoffed. Or what? I smiled. You don't want to find out. Then I walked out, leaving him sitting there, looking like he'd just seen a ghost. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because now, I had a new question. Was Emily playing both of us? And if so, why? As I walked away from James, my mind raced. His face, his words, none of it sat right with me. Something was off. Emily told him I didn't love her anymore. That she was afraid to leave. That didn't add up. If she truly wanted to be with him, she would have left by now. Unless, she was lying to him too. I had to rethink everything. Instead of going home, I drove to my brother's place. If there was anyone I could talk to without judgment, it was Mark. Mark had always been the blunt, no BS type. When I laid everything out, Emily's messages, James' reaction, my gut feeling, he shook his head. She's playing you both, he said immediately. I frowned. Why would she do that? Mark leaned back, rubbing his jaw. Think about it. If she wanted to leave you, she would've. But she's keeping both of you on the hook. That means there's something she's not telling either of you. The thought sent a chill through me. So what do I do? I asked. Mark smirked. You outplay her. I sat back, considering. If Emily was lying to both of us, then the best way to get the truth was to trap her in her own game. I had an idea. A risky one. But it just might work. That night, I acted normal. Emily came home, smiling, kissing me like she wasn't sending, "I love you," texts to another man hours ago. It was sickening. Over dinner, I played my first move. You've been working late a lot, I said casually. Emily looked up, hesitating for just a second before nodding. Yeah, things have been crazy. Lie. I smiled. I was thinking, maybe you and I should take a weekend away. Just us. Get away from all the stress. She blinked. Oh. She wasn't expecting that. That sounds nice, she said carefully. When were you thinking? Next weekend, I said. Somewhere quiet. No work, no phones, just us. She hesitated. Something flickered in her eyes, was it guilt? Or panic? Finally, she smiled. I'd love that. Lie number 2. Emily had no intention of going away with me. And now, I just had to wait and see what excuse she came up with to get out of it. I wasn't just catching her in a lie. I was forcing one. The next day, Ryan finally called me back. I got something on James Carter, he said. And you're gonna want to hear this. I braced myself. What is it? Ryan sighed. He's married. I almost dropped my phone. What? Married, Ryan repeated. Wife's name is Lisa Carter. They've been together for 6 years. And get this, Lisa filed for divorce 3 months ago. My mind exploded with possibilities. Emily was involved with a married man. A man who was in the middle of a divorce. A man who thought Emily was going to leave me for him. Was Emily actually planning to leave? Or was she just waiting, making sure James' divorce went through first? It was all starting to make sense. Emily had been hedging her bets. Keeping me just in case James' divorce fell apart. Keeping James just in case she decided she was done with me. I wasn't just dealing with a cheating wife. I was dealing with a master manipulator. And now, it was time to see just how far she was willing to go. Now that I knew the truth, I had only one question left. How far was Emily willing to go to protect her lies? She had been juggling 2 men, feeding each of us carefully crafted half-truths. James thought she was leaving me. I was supposed to believe nothing was wrong. But in reality, she wasn't choosing either of us. She was just waiting. And I was done waiting. I didn't confront her. Not yet. That would be too easy. Instead, I decided to let her walk into her own trap. I sent James another text from my fake number. I need to see you. Can we meet? James, of course. Where? I picked a quiet restaurant, one with private booths. James took the bait immediately. And now, all I needed was Emily. That night, I tested her. Hey, I said over dinner. I was thinking, maybe we could go out tomorrow night. Emily barely hesitated. Oh, she glanced at her phone quickly. I actually have a late meeting tomorrow. I smiled to myself. Caught. I leaned forward, resting my chin on my hand. That's a shame. I was really looking forward to spending time with you. She forced a small smile. I know. But it's just bad timing. Next week, okay. She was good. Really good. But not good enough. The next evening, I arrived at the restaurant early. I took a seat in a booth toward the back, where I had a perfect view of the entrance. James showed up first. He looked nervous, glancing around as if expecting someone to recognize him. He checked his phone a few times, probably waiting for Emily. I didn't have to wait long. At exactly 7:15 p.m., Emily walked in. She scanned the restaurant quickly, adjusting her dress, then headed straight for James' table. She didn't even look around to see if I was there. Because in her mind, I was at home, completely oblivious. I watched as she leaned in, touched his arm, and gave him the same smile she gave me. And something inside me snapped. I stood up and walked toward them. Emily was mid-sentence when she saw me. Her eyes widened, her face draining of color. Hey, honey, I said smoothly, sliding into the seat across from her. James stiffened, looking between us. What the hell is this? Emily opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Go on, I said. You were saying something about how much you miss him. James pushed back in his seat. You set me up. I turned to him. I didn't set you up, James. She did. Emily was shaking now. I placed my phone on the table and pressed play. Her messages to both of us started reading out loud. James went pale. I had saved every message, every lie, every moment she had played us against each other. And now, we were both watching her drown in them. The silence was unbearable. Finally, James stood up, shaking his head. You told me you loved me. His voice was cold. You told me you were leaving him. Emily's lips trembled. James, were you ever going to leave? I cut in. She turned to me, eyes wild. Of course. I needed time. Bullshit, James snapped. You were just waiting to see if my divorce would go through first, weren't you? Her silence was all the answer we needed. James let out a bitter laugh. Unbelievable. Then, without another word, he walked out. I turned to Emily. She looked like she might cry. But I wasn't going to comfort her. She started, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. No more lies, Emily. My voice was calm. Too calm. She swallowed hard. What happens now? I stood up, tossing some cash on the table. That's up to you, I said. Then I walked out, leaving her sitting there, alone in the mess she had created. But the truth was, I already knew exactly what I was going to do next. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove. Nowhere in particular, just far enough to clear my head, to let the weight of everything sink in. Emily had lied. She had manipulated. She had juggled two lives, two men, two versions of herself. And for what? Because she wasn't strong enough to make a choice. Because she thought she could get away with it forever. She had underestimated me. That was her first mistake. Her second. Thinking I would just walk away quietly. When I finally returned home, it was late. Emily was already there, sitting on the couch, eyes red-rimmed from crying. Where were you? She asked, her voice small. I ignored the question. Did you think I wouldn't find out? She flinched. I never meant to hurt you. I laughed, actually laughed. That's the best you've got. You didn't mean to hurt me. Tears welled in her eyes. I was confused. Stop. I held up a hand. No more lies. No more excuses. She swallowed hard. What do you want from me? I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. That's the thing, Emily. I don't want anything from you anymore. Panic flickered across her face. She had expected anger. A fight. Screaming. Maybe even a second chance. But indifference? That terrified her. I'll end it, she stammered. With James. I'll prove it to you. We can fix this. I shook my head. There is no we anymore. Her breath hitched. Are you saying you're leaving? I exhaled slowly. Not yet. Confusion crossed her face. Then what? I smiled, a slow, knowing smile. I'm giving you one chance to make this right. One way out that doesn't end with you losing everything. She leaned forward, desperate. Anything. Just tell me. I let the silence stretch. Then, finally, I said the words that would end this game once and for all. You're going to tell James the truth. Her face went white. I don't understand, she stammered. I leaned in. You're going to call James. Right now. And you're going to tell him exactly what you've done. She shook her head rapidly. No. I can't. I pulled out my phone. Then I will. Her eyes widened. Wait. I dialed. Put it on speaker. The phone rang. Once. Twice. Then. Hello. James' voice was sharp, distant. Emily looked like she wanted to vomit. I held the phone out to her. Go ahead, sweetheart. Tell him the truth. She didn't move. So I spoke for her. James, it's me. Silence. Then, coldly, what do you want? I didn't hesitate. I just thought you should hear it from Emily herself. The truth. Emily shook her head frantically, pleading with her eyes. I didn't budge. Go on, Em. My voice was smooth, controlled. Tell him. Tears spilled down her cheeks. But she knew. She was trapped. So, in a broken whisper, she spoke. I lied to you, James. Silence. Emily swallowed hard. I told you I was leaving him, but I never was. James exhaled sharply. You were just stringing me along. I didn't mean to. He cut her off. Save it. Then, after a long pause, he muttered, You deserve each other. And then the line went dead. Emily sobbed into her hands. But I felt nothing. Because the truth was, this was only step one. And tomorrow, I'd deliver the final blow. Emily barely slept that night. I could hear her tossing and turning beside me, her breath uneven, her body rigid with anxiety. Good. She was starting to understand something. This wasn't a nightmare she could wake up from. This was real. And it wasn't over yet. When she woke up, she looked at me like a prisoner waiting for a sentence. Can we talk? She whispered. I sat up slowly, stretching. About what? She swallowed. Us. I smirked. There is no us anymore, Emily. Tears filled her eyes. But I love you. I tilted my head, watching her carefully. Do you? She nodded frantically. Yes. I just made a mistake, but I laughed, shaking my head. No, Emily. A mistake is one bad decision. You made hundreds. Every lie you told, every night you snuck around, every time you looked me in the eyes and pretended to be my wife, that wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. She broke then, sobbing into her hands. I let her. Because I wasn't done that. I stood up, walked to my desk, and pulled out a folder. Then, I dropped it in front of her. Emily's breath hitched as she read the words on the cover. Divorce agreement. Her head snapped up. You already filed? I smiled. I've had them ready for a while. Just needed you to give me a reason. She shook her head violently. No. No, we can fix this. We can go to therapy, we can. I cut her off. Therapy won't change who you are. She opened her mouth, then closed it, realizing I was serious. This is happening, Emily, I said firmly. You're going to sign those papers. You're going to pack your things. And by the end of the week, you're gone. She blinked rapidly, panic setting in. But and don't think about fighting it, I added, leaning down. Because if you try, I have enough proof of your affair to ruin you. Her lips trembled. She knew I wasn't bluffing. This wasn't just about leaving. This was about winning. She signed the papers. She packed her things. And on Friday evening, she stood at the door with her suitcase, looking at me one last time. I never wanted it to end like this, she whispered. I met her eyes, my voice cold. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you betrayed me. She flinched. Then, with one last, broken glance, she walked out. And I never looked back. In the weeks that followed, people asked me what happened. I never gave details. I didn't need to. The truth? She lost everything. James never spoke to her again. Her friends? Most of them took my side. And me? I moved on. Better. Stronger. Free. Because at the end of the day, Emily thought she could control the game. She forgot one thing. I always play to win.